Hola familia, soy Carlos Vides con Mentes Innovadoras aquí por Televida. Yo espero que usted esté pasando un feliz verano, que esté disfrutando en armonía y preparándose a lo mejor para las vacaciones o a lo mejor ya regresó de vacaciones. Como siempre, mis consejos son de que si usted va a viajar en carro, que asegure que su carro esté en buenas condiciones, que él pueda llegar a la distancia donde usted va, que todos sus papeles estén en orden, sus seguros y que todo esté bien para que no tenga accidentes en el camino cuando usted va viajando con su familia. De lo contrario, disfrute y pase usted un feliz verano. Este día les traigo un invitado muy especial. Ella es una abogada local de aquí de Kansas City. Sus oficinas están aquí en el Crossroad de Kansas City. Ella se llama Reika y está con Sharman en Crawford Law Firm aquí en Downtown. Nos va a hablar de muchas cosas, pero lo más importante que ella nos va a hablar es de un libro que ella nos va a presentar ahora. Ahí les voy a hablar más al rato de esto, pero antes que todo quiero que conozcamos a la abogada especializada en inmigración y ella nos va a explicar un poco más de su carrera y después vamos a hablar del libro. Póngale atención. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
What an honor to have you here in our studio at Televida. And, the reason why I invited you is because of the book.
Yes.
You have this beautiful book that you have wrote. But before we get to the book, I want to learn more about you.
Yeah, so I practice immigration litigation.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the cases that I do are messy. They are complicated. Where I thrive is in the federal courts, in the Supreme Court. Most of the cases are involving new interpretations of law or rethinking how we look at immigration and immigrants in terms of how can the law be. I mean, the immigration laws aren't great, right?
No, they're not easy.
They're not great, and they're not easy,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not always workable. But, in 1996, they changed the law, but they didn't do a good job. So that's what I always say is when you have non-lawyers trying to write law, you get bad law, right? And a good speech doesn't always make a good law. And so in those areas, in those gray areas, there's still lots of room for the courts to intervene and interpret. And that's really what I work on. But, I do removal defense. I do cases where people are fighting against deportation and family-based cases, naturalization cases. But my heart and soul is in the courtroom. And so that's why, as you'll see in the book is also in the courtroom.
That is fantastic. As you all know, I went through a case myself. I was deported myself back in 2002, and finding a good attorney back in 2002 was very hard. And in the process, when I was being deported, my family was never ever able to find somebody that can help us out here in Kansas City. And now we are blessed that we have good attorneys here in Kansas City, and we have somebody like you.
Well, you're not wrong about how hard it is in Kansas City to find good representation. Back in 2002, there were no nonprofits even.
Correct.
Right? In 2011, actually, my husband and I created a nonprofit to help people who are unable to afford a private lawyer to be able to use a nonprofit to get representation, good representation in immigration court here in Kansas City. So, this has been a labor of love for 20 years now or more to help the community and to make sure that people going into immigration court never feel alone, regardless of whether they are able to financially afford a private attorney or if they need someone, to help them from the nonprofit angle.
And that right there, the part of feeling alone, I can testify to that. That is a big, big deal because I remember when we were going through the process, some of the attorneys that we talked to, they were very harsh. They were very disrespectful. Mm-hmm. To a point where one of them said to us, after we paid him for the consultation fees, and he decided he would not take the case. No, I'm sorry, I take this back. He took the case, but he said to my wife, just let your husband hide like a cucaracha.
Oh my God.
Let your husband just hide like a roach. You don't need to be fighting for anything. You don't even need to apply for any papers. Just keep hiding. And I'm like, we are not hiding. I want to be able to have the ability to live in this country and be productive and do the things that everybody else does, which is raise a family, grow a business, and be a role model citizen in the Kansas City metro or anywhere in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people that it's not true. I've never met a client ever in my entire career who has said, there's a pathway for me to become legal, but that's okay. I'm going to prefer to hide and stay in the shadows. I've never met that client. Most people are eager to have normal lives and contribute to the community, contribute to society as a whole. The laws, unfortunately, are not helpful in that process. There's also so much misinformation. People will say, well, you have a child in the United States. Obviously, that's all that's necessary.
Yeah.
No, obviously, that's not how the law works.
No, that's not how it works.
That's not how it works.
Yeah.
Or you've been here a long time. You should be able to fix your papers. That isn't how that works.
No, not either. And those of you that are watching this, if you never been through this process, it is a very complicated process. And for the attorneys that get into this field, I have respect because you constantly has to be studying. And the one part that bothers me the most is that I speak for my case.
Yeah.
When you get in the hands of immigration, there is zero laws that can protect you. It's like you have zero rights to anything. You don't even you're no longer looked at as a human. That's what I got out of my case.
Yeah.
We were not treated humanly, or we were never given an opportunity to even present the case. I got deported and I never been in front of a judge.
See, and I think that's the thing. And back in the day, and I mean so much so, I think a lot changed when you had family separation going on at the border, right? I think the American people finally went, wait, what do you mean we're putting children in cages, right? Prior to that, no one wanted to talk about immigration. If you said, I'm an immigration attorney, why don't you sit down, let me help you understand what the process is? They'd be like, yeah, we don't really want to talk about that, right? When you had family separation going on at the border where kids were starting to be, put in cages, and those photographs, those pictures were coming out with the Mylar blankets around the kids, right? I think for the first time, the American population on a greater level were like, what is happening? Like, how is this America? Right? But it'd been happening for decades. People in the system knew that it'd been happening for decades. This wasn't anything new.
In some cases, worse than others.
That's right.
And I feel that, I'm a big God believer, and a lot of good things happen that I got out of it. But I feel that I learned so much, and now I can help others. But when I meet people like you, attorneys that specialize working with immigration, I have a great respect because you guys do good for families. And honest, educated, they put time into learning. Because I've been told by several attorneys that there's so many layers.
Yeah.
And it's so much in politics. Like each country has different politics in going to the process of a visa.
Right.
So that is really, when I hear the saying, especially when there's a politician running, they say, well, the Hispanics want to create a process where you just go back in line. And I always tell people, the non-Hispanic people, I said, if you show me where is a line where we can apply, I would be very happy to go to that end of that line and apply for papers so I can come to this country. And those are the things I always argue about it. And then today I found somebody that said the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a soundbite, right? It's a good speech. You can stand as a politician and say, why don't they just get in line? Or why don't they just get legal? I want to say, please show me how that exists, because the current laws are not always workable in that way. And yes, there are some cases that are nice and clean and straightforward, but that's the exception. That's not really the rule.
Well, but when you get to those cases, it's because this type of cases are with people that are high up in degrees. Like they told me, if you're a scientist, if you're an athlete, if you are rich in your country and you have everything in line in your country, then you can qualify to get visas.
Yes and no, right? I mean, $800,000 investment I mean, that's not the average person.
Correct.
You know, or being someone who is of extraordinary ability, where you have won the Nobel Peace Prize. Again, not the average person.
Correct.
But when you look at the history of immigration laws, in prior to 1996. Prior to 96, because 96 is when the law changes and it becomes harder and harsher. But prior to 96, the focus really was on family unity. Right? The focus was on how do we keep families together and how do we create opportunities for business people and entrepreneurs and innovators to come and help grow the country in a direction that was much more accessible to the masses. 1996, a good speech becomes a horrible law. And realistically, since that time, criminal deportation based on criminal convictions for very small things, right, became the norm.
Yeah.
And so, you go, we're all people. We all make mistakes. We all have things in our past that maybe we're not so greatly happy about, right? But by the same token, to have that exist to where there's just no getting around it. Like they use it as a weapon against you.
It is, and unfortunately, that is the reality of life.
Yeah.
And because we in a community, we come here with the search of a dream, because America really is the land of dreams.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
It really is the land of opportunities. If you come to United States to dedicate yourself to work, and I tell people not only work but study. Learn about the business of United States,
right.
Learn about the system of United States, learn the process, learn the culture. It becomes really, really rich. But it's formed by us. One more time, we are the immigrants. We are the ones who've been doing it for years and years and centuries. And when I meet somebody like you that does what you do, I'm like, gosh, I got so many clients that I can give you.
I mean, my passion is always been to say, how do we open the doors of opportunity? So many times what you see is even in the immigrant communities, right? What you see is people get here. They get their documents, and then they don't want to talk about what happened.
No.
They don't want to talk about how do we help the people behind us. And most of the time, and you see it in history, especially in the immigration laws, what you see is over and over and over again, people say, okay, I made it. I did it the right way. Well, what was that right way?
What was that?
Right? What was that right way, right? Or they'll say, well, my parents came legally. Well, yeah, in the 1900s, there were no immigration laws. So yeah, they came legally, right?
Yeah.
But we're not talking about that anymore, And so some of these sound bites that the media puts out, they're not very helpful to the conversation or the discussion, or even helping people understand the reality of the situation.
It is very difficult, definitely. So I also, the other reason why we get too excited about this. We get too excited about this. Now, I want to bring you into your book.
Yes.
And set us up for the book, because in a minute, when I show it to the people, set us up for the book.
Yeah. So for a very long time, even before I began the journey to write the book, for a very long time, what I realized, again, as I told you, my passion is in the courtroom. And what I realized is that we don't talk about the trauma that we put these kids through when immigration comes into people's homes, normally at 6 a.m, right? While mom and dad are still in their night clothes, the kids are still in their night clothes. What happens? Immigration shows up at 6 a.m, bangs on the door, and then you open the door because you're still half asleep. And one of the parents, one of the family members is taken out of the home. We don't talk about how much trauma we have now put into that child. And immigrant families in particular don't like to talk about many topics, but specifically immigration issues with their children. They don't want to talk about, oh, this is how we came, this is why we came, this is what we did. And so for many times what will happen is we talk about children, we tell them through bedtime stories and other children's stories about how the boogeyman exists, right? The boogeyman came into the house, took dad, and we're not going to talk about that? I mean, there's some generational trauma that is being created there. Yeah. And the only way that I knew to start to encourage that conversation was to give teachers and doctors and lawyers and parents the resources that are necessary to be able to say, look, this is not, you're not alone, that this is a story that happens over and over again. Mm-hmm. And by talking about it, by bringing it to life, we are now taking away some of its damaging power and actually starting to heal some of the trauma that we're putting the kids through.
Excellent. With that in mind, I want to bring the book, and I want us to look at this book. Just a minute.
Yeah.
This is the book I'm talking about. I want you to pay close attention to this book. A fascinating book because it illustrates the life of an average immigrant in the United States. And I personally feel touched because it really, sometimes I feel like she wrote this book about me. Will you tell me, Reika, will you tell me about this book?
Yeah, so Alia the Brave is a story about a little girl whose family is impacted when immigration comes to their home mm-hmm. and takes dad out of the home. And in creating Alia, you will notice that in the book, I don't say where Alia is from. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason is because Alia is every child, mm-hmm. right? The book is available in English and in Spanish, but that doesn't mean that there are not other communities and other cultures that are equally impacted by the very same notion of immigration showing up in the house, taking
this right here.
Yeah,
I can tell you.
Yeah, it's real, scary. Right? It's very scary.
Very scary when you hear the door knock. And I remember specifically 1994 in New York.
Yeah.
And at the time I was traveling with a backpack. That was my luggage. Mm-hmm. That I always had it ready. Mm-hmm. And I had my shoes by the bed and I went to sleep knowing if somebody knocked on that door, I had enough clothing to put on and look presentable so I won't get arrested.
Yeah.
And why was that? Because at the time I was applying for my work permit.
Yeah.
And instead of getting a work permit, I got a letter from immigration saying that I was in trouble for applying.
Yeah.
And so the attorney told me, well, you're not going to get the papers. They may end up deporting you.
Yeah.
And what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, this is a reality, right?
Yeah.
People live with this consistently. How many times have we seen in the news or anywhere else where this has come true over and over and over again? Mm-hmm. We see pictures of people being dragged out of cars, people being dragged out of apartments, people being dragged out of public spaces, right? Mm-hmm. Where kids are watching. Yeah. And the kids are always watching. Yeah. And whether it's your own children or someone else's children, the kids are always watching.
Absolutely. And whether you know that they understand, they do understand. Because I remember things when I was a tiny baby. And I can tell you this right here is a scene where I see the immigration being present and the family being there and the little baby just wondering what's going on. Is that what's going on?
That's what's going on. I mean, and notice it's in the morning, right? Parents are still trying to get up, trying to get going, and there's that knock at the door, and it changes the course of your life.
But what for you at home that you're watching this, I feel that if you buy this book, because this book is going to be for sale, and it's written by the attorney Reika, which is a law firm right here in downtown Kansas City. And I think if you buy this book, whether for you or for your family, for a friend or for a church, you may want to buy a bulk of books and give it to the church that has nurture, the kids at home, the church, and sharing with them, because this can be for a kid can impact their life to whether they are going through or to understand the process of what an immigrant family goes through in these situations, so they can help other kids to cope with this kind of situations. That's the way I see it. Am I seeing it wrong?
100%. I think that's exactly why this was created is to start those hard conversations, to say, look, parents, teachers, lawyers, community members, we need to be able to have these conversations. Until we take out the stigma of talking about immigration, we're never going to be able to solve these problems. Until we started looking at each other as human beings, as opposed to, that undocumented person or that person's illegal. Until we stop putting those labels on each other and looking at each other, and we begin to start looking at each other as human beings, we're never going to be able to solve this problem.
I like that. Look at this little baby here. When I see this, for those of you at home, I think of my little girl. Because she used to say that she used to see ghosts coming in the room. And she will cry. We're not going to.
Well, I mean, those ghosts were the boogeyman, right? They were the boogeyman.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that I think that your experience, and I can see that you are personally, you really do see your story in Alia's story.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing is that is why I think this book is so powerful, because it cuts across cultures and it cuts about and talks about something that this conversation is long overdue. Right? And until we continue to have that, I mean, think about it. Teachers may not understand why all of a sudden a child is acting in a particular way, or they may not understand why a child who's been making A's starts to lose their interest in studies, because no one's empowered that child to say, hold on, this is what's happened to me, right? I think about, when I write this book, I think about Postville. If you remember back in Postville, Iowa, when you had all of those parents go to the meatpacking plant for work, they didn't come home. Can you imagine the trauma that we impacted on those children and those conversations that never happened? So this is a conversation, in my opinion, that's long overdue.
And the part is that some of you say, well, they're all criminals. Not true. Because think about it. If you ever met me, and if you're watching this video and you never met me, well, you can look me up. You can find me anywhere you want. And, not all of us are criminals. And in fact, we don't come here with the mind of becoming criminals. And, some of us get deported just because that's just the way things work. In this situation right here, you have are we in a court setup?
We're in a court setup, yes. And one of the things is people don't understand that, TV makes courtrooms look all of that. That is not an immigration court, right? A lot of times, there's very few people in the courtroom. It's usually just the judge. It's usually just the government's attorney. It's the private attorney or the nonprofit attorney on behalf of the respondent. And that's it. And the persons, if they're detained, they're on a TV screen. They're not even in the room. And so, so the setup there is the court hearing itself.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that this is as real as it gets. If you ever thought about getting a book for your kids, and if you're going through this, I think this book may be helpful to make that kid's mind understand what's going on with the mom or dad or aunt or grandma, because this happens around their families, and normally happen to somebody we love or the kids love. So I think that this can be a very good barrier breaker for them to understand and have a better understanding and make different ideas in their mind, instead of put them in their mind. Like my daughter says that she didn't know that she had post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
And now that she's a grown kid, she's in her 20s, all this time she's like, I'm realizing where that comes from.
I'm telling you, it gets baked into the story of the individual. It's residual or the residue of that post-traumatic stress disorder shows up later on. That's why I say it's generational trauma that we are doing to these kids. And, if we don't solve the problems now, then you're going to start to see some of that manifest as the kids get older, and then they have children. And they don't understand why some of the things
it looks like you put a lot of work, a lot of thoughts into this book, and I see the happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, the happy ending is because we want to leave children with hope, right? Even though it's a dismal system, there's really two reasons why I thought that a happy ending was necessary. The first is because I think that politicians need to understand and lawmakers need to understand that, look, we really do want there to be a positive, hopeful ending, because that's what America is supposed to represent, right? And secondly, we want to make sure that children are given that hope that yeah, things don't always work out. I understand that. I work with enough individuals to know that it's not always a happy ending.
Yeah.
But we should strive to be a happy ending. We should leave these children with the desire to say, I'm going to rise above the trauma that was impacted, even though, they didn't choose to be in that situation.
Now, where can people buy this book at?
Sure. So there's 3 places. The first is Amazon, of course. Amazon, easiest way, right? Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Or if they want, they can also go to RekhaSharmacrawford.com. And they can also, there's some merchandise and things out there. I will say that a portion of the proceeds are going to 3 separate nonprofits, because it is so important to me that the work continue, that the representation continue, that the ability and access to lawyers continue. So there's 3 specific nonprofits. One of them is my nonprofit, which is here locally. It's called the Clinic at Sharma Crawford Attorneys at Law. But the other 2 is the National Immigration Project, and then also the National Immigration Litigation Alliance that does nationwide high impact litigation. And so this was my way to keep paying it forward, to make sure that even the small proceeds that come from this continue the work and continue to spread the good in the world.
Fantastic. For those of you at home that are watching this, it really comes from the bottom of my heart to you. This book, I feel that can definitely help with your kids understanding what's going on in their life. Do you have a message you may want to leave to the parents or to the kids?
I mean, I think if there was one thing I would tell parents and tell the children is don't lose hope. Because if we lose hope, it doesn't allow us a path forward. And we have to go through this path together. And so as a result, hold on to the hope, but have the hard conversations. Because a diamond is not born out of no pressure. A diamond is born out of pressure. And so even though this is a situation that is pressureful and stressful, out of it can still create something very beautiful.
Wow. That was great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for being here today. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but I tell you that it's been a very pleasant and informational. I hope that you guys up there pay attention to this. Look for Attorney Rekha at the law firm Sharman and Crawford at the Crossroads. You can find him on Facebook, I'm sure. Find him on Google. And talk to this lady. She is an amazing human being, and she has her heart in the right place. And if you're going through a situation where you can't find a place to go, or you don't feel understood by some of the immigration attorneys in town, look her up. I definitely going to be recommending her to you. So ask me about it. I will give you her information so you can talk to her. And also don't forget about the book. I feel that every one of us should have this book. I'm going to take one home today and give it to my daughter and my little one and my older daughter, so they can both read it and see what it is like now that they're grown-ups. So for those of you at home, I appreciate the time, and share this video and share it with the community. And for those of you that don't understand what immigration is all about, do some more reading. Don't listen to the media. Do some reading and understand the concept. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. It's been a pleasure.
Excellent. See you soon. This is Carlos Vides with Innovative Minds here at Televida.